and that's why I hate New Year's Eve. I can't stand this holiday. As much as I love Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve is one of these things. Like, what are your thoughts? I mean, it's like, I mean,
Well, like I said before, we came upon this holiday corridor this week
yes,
that I couldn't wait until January 2nd,
you
because
can't stand
then
the whole
you
lot
know,
of
we,
it, right? So
we we get back to normalcy after this
it is
weekend.
true. It is very hard to do any kind of business we find during this time of year. It's very hard to get anybody on the phone. Very hard to get anything done.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
don't like I don't like any type of event or any type of day where it just becomes amateur hour, where people are expected to go out.
right.
I'd
Yeah.
rather just give me Thursday, just give me Friday. I'm happy
Yeah,
with those days. But
the
Cinco de Mayo, St. Patrick's Day,
the
New
day the
Year's
day
Eve.
the day before Thanksgiving in Buffalo, and I'm sure it's around a lot of other places in the U.S.,
Oh
is
my God.
amateur hour. You go out, you try to go out for dinner on the day before Thanksgiving. It's a
Where you'll see all
zoo.
the people that you didn't want to see at the reunion. Why you didn't go to your high school reunion? That's where
Yeah,
you see everybody
it's it's
back.
terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But yeah, no, the week, the last day before Christmas Eve through New Year's night is just, I mean, if you like getting together with your family, and some people do and some people don't,
Yeah.
then this is not the greatest time. I found an inventive way of not to getting together with my family. I got deathly ill for like 4 days.
That'll
So,
do it.
but I didn't particularly. I mean, believe me, I would have rather had dinner with my mom and my brother and my niece than to have the flu that I had for 4 days. But it was an inventive way of avoiding it.
Yeah.
The New Year's Eve thing to me is like this whole counting down midnight
Yeah.
and the resolutions and like it is the only time it's fun is when you are like if you're dating somebody and you're just going out to a big party or whatever that with people that's just where you don't people that you don't know you can just go and have fun and mock them. That's
Yeah.
the fun part of New Year's Eve. If you can do that, but once you're married, once you have kids, that New Year's Eve just totally it's just because kids you can't go out anymore and then it becomes these parties with like I shouldn't say this because probably these people are watching the show. No, but then it becomes no, and then nothing is. But then it becomes parties with like other people with kids. So it becomes like okay, that's fine. And I have this thing about midnight of not wanting to be anywhere but my home. Like I just want to be in my house at midnight. So we'll go to a party again. We'll stop at a couple different parties on New Year's Eve, but then we'll end up here
Yeah.
at midnight. Like or
When
like
you're
by 11:15, we'll be here.
when you're having a good year, when you've had a good year, then I think it's a holiday that you don't exactly mind. I mean, like I know that I'm going out with some friends for New Year's Eve dinner, and we may be out at midnight, or we may be I may be back here. That's fine. But like on years that are bad, or years that you're alone,
Yeah.
I sort of like stay home, rent a couple movies, block the clock, so I don't even know that it's midnight, and just avoid it. That's just, like okay, great. It's just oh there okay, here comes another year that sucks.
Wow. I'm with you. I guess. No,
Bah humbug.
I've been through that. I know exactly what you're saying, though. I do. I completely do. I think we count the times we go.
New Year's Eve just never lives up to expectations.
No, it
Because
can't.
people think it's supposed to be this grandiose, oh, out with the old and with the new, and it's like
Well,
everyone
that's-
just, it's
and
either the worst hangover of the year,
Right.
or it's just like the
Yeah.
worst, just this party was horrible, or the night didn't go as planned.
Ryan,
'cause
that's the When Harry Met Sally syndrome. That's like everything is going to happen right. Everything is going to be corrected after 20 years on New Year's Eve. All of a sudden, the girl that you want is going to walk in through the door, and then bull crap.
So you're not meeting anyone at the top of the Empire State Building this year?
No, that's Sleepless in Seattle, and that wasn't New Year's Eve.
Sorry,
But
yeah. I was sleeping in Seattle, yeah. No,
strangely, both of them were Meg Ryan, so maybe
they were. That's why I get them confused all the time.
Yeah.
You got mail. I confused that one too. So they're all the same to me. But yeah, they. So funny. No, I mean it's just, and can we all agree that it's the worst television of the year too? Like New Year's Eve is the worst, and that's like the biggest issue. The whole New Year's Rocking Eve thing is horrible. I mean, it's horrible. It's like it's not. There's no one has come up with yet, and this is astonishing to me, the right television for New Year's Eve. There has to be something that, like, to me, what is it like? To me, it's like I don't know, like a Bugs Bunny marathon or something ridiculous like that.
Well, we one of the usual regular events this year, because apparently Anderson Cooper had like emergency surgery a couple days ago, so he's not going to be able to like yuck it up with Kathy Griffin on CNN or whatever channel it's on. So I guess we're gonna have to all get a have Carson Daly and Ryan Seacrest battle it out for our hearts at 11:59.
You're right, though, Eck. It's always, I spend half the night, if I see a TV on at all, I just feel bad for all the people freezing their asses off in Times Square.
Right, that's the other
gathered
thing.
like
that
sheep.
Is not a cool thing to do. Like the only cool thing you can do in Times Square is I had a friend who had who has like an office that looks out, and you can actually, they have a party where they have big windows and they have like a party there in the office where you can look out and you can see the ball drop. That would be fun. You can look out and actually see the people, but actually to be in that crowd, you know what you have to do? You have to go like, you're already probably too late. And you have to go like a day or two ahead of time. You get put into a square that you can't leave at all, like because of security. They put you in a box. I don't know what you do if you have to go to the bathroom. I guess you just
my brother did it a couple years ago. He said he was there, and they put you in a box, and you're there for 6 hours. Yeah. And you can't leave. He said people are just peeing on themselves. Like it's the worst. He felt like he was in a prison holding cell.
Right, exactly. And what do you do? I mean, it could be raining because like the New Year's, this area of the country doesn't really get that much. It's probably going to be a cold, wet rain. It's not going to be like romantically snowing or anything like that.
Well, you're looking for the nearest sewer grate for.
Oh, exactly. It's horrible. And I mean, if you could get a hotel, and there's hotel rooms that look out on this, and I've thought about that. Like, okay, but I called up one time, and they're like literally like 15 years out reserved, right? So, but that would still be maybe fun, like 15 years from now to reserve. But even that would be a letdown, because it's just for what it is. It's just anyway.
And you know what? And I'm not putting. I love Buffalo because Buffalo is my hometown, but Times Square in New York, there's the tradition, and there's gonna be like a million people there. So I mean, even though I think I would never do it, and I think it sucks, I can understand the attraction to it. Like Buffalo has this tradition. There's this building, the Electric Tower downtown, where they've had their own little version of the ball drop, and it's just like, okay, you got this little ball on a string basically being lowered, and it's like, really, like, come on, and like, I mean. I don't understand why you would really want to wait outside when it's now this year it's going to be probably 20 or 30 degrees, but when it's 6 degrees and like your breath is freezing and your nostrils are frozen shut. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, Happy New Year. It's like, what's the great? What is the great excitement there? Okay, I'm going to start
of eating pork and sauerkraut on New Year's. That's a Pennsylvania thing for good luck. It comes from the Amish, I believe. I'm not sure. Or the Quakers, one of those groups. And so that, I mean, there are things like in Philly they do the fireworks. I've done that too. It's okay. It's fun. I mean, there's a band. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, why be outside? Last year, what we did was pretty cool. What we did, we have like a fire pit out back, at a pretty good sized yard, so we can do a campfire type thing, and it's fun. So we did a campfire at midnight. And what we said we would do. We did it like at 11:15. We went to a party, and we left that party at 11. And a couple friends and my wife and I came back, and we sat around the campfire, and we literally didn't have any, like you said, no clocks, no nothing. We sat out there. We're going to sit out there for a while, and we thought to ourselves, at midnight, because there were parties in the houses nearby, probably, and we did. At midnight, you heard people like, yay, you heard this little bit of like, oh, it must be midnight, that kind of thing, And that was fun, and that to me was just you sitting around there talking about stuff. That was cool, because campfire talk, that's like kind of like the New Year's talk type thing. You're like, oh, okay, you start getting reflective around a campfire and talking about stuff like that. That was cool. The Mummers Parade, some people have talked about too. Oh my gosh, the Mummers Parade. where to go with that. I'm not going to go. I mean, I love the that's the Philadelphia tradition of New Year's Day. This is a 15-hour parade, guys. This is not like a small thing. It's on TV the entire time, and I'd
rather watch a marathon of the show Alice.
Right. I know. To me that's like what you do. You kind of good show that's just worth watching in a marathon form, or a good group of movies like, watch every Star Wars movie from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Something like that's brilliant.
West Wing Marathon or something like that.
Wing. I did see the end of Newsroom finally. Did you see the end of Newsroom?
Yeah, I did. Did
you like it?
I loved the show. I didn't really want it to end, and I think they could have. I was a little, and no, we can say it now because it's been a couple weeks. I could see it coming a mile away that they were going to kill off the elder statesman of the show as sort of like a signature or ending event. I just wish it wouldn't. I think Sorkin got tired of the show and didn't want to write it anymore after 3 years. But it could have been a little bit of a better ending. But I liked the show. So
I liked the show a lot until they brought in the internet guy. Like they had to bring in the guy, and then I'm like, oh, this is so freaking cliche. This is like, but the guy from Amazon bought the Washington Post, right? And he's done an actually great job with it. And surprisingly enough, and there's still issues, but it's not like this guy's coming in the newsroom. We're gonna have people, our own reporters on the streets. Everyone's gonna have a camera. Everybody's gonna be tweeting in the news, and they were just going so stereotypical of all that's wrong.
Well, that's been the theme of the entire season.
Yeah, and they just
Sorkin.
That's where they go.
Sorkin was ripping against citizen media, Twitter, blogs. That's all he did because he's a fan of establishment media, and that's basically dying. So Well,
the show should be set in the 50s because he's trying to go for the 50s media, and it's just not that way. I mean, and journalism's just not that way anymore, and it's okay that it's not that way. There are benefits to the see, the whole thing is just like we do progress. There was a time, when people were afraid of computers because, hey, if you can, you need a typewriter, and there were times when this is all, that you couldn't. I don't know. Journalism's that's a big debate for another day, and of course people are going to rip me to shreds for even bringing it up because I
brought it up.
I'm an anonymous hockey blogger or what have you, and who reports rumors, right? But I do understand and went to school for actual journalism, and were I covering the war and not covering hockey rumors, I would do it differently. So I just I do understand the differences there. But anyway, let's get on with the show. It's the 30th of December.
It is.
2014. I was going to say 2 more times I'll be able to say 2014, and then I'll screw up.
No, don't worry. You'll be saying 2014 many more times. We know that.
No question about it. We'll go Mike, then Ryan. Here we go. Ready? Whenever you're ready, Mike. Hey, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, December 30th, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Ryan Garner.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. Our New Year's Eve show, coming to you live from up there in you're up there in Canada today, Ryan.
That's right, Lethbridge, Alberta, home of the Lethbridge Hurricanes.
Lethbridge.
And Chris Versteeg.
And Chris Versteeg, yes, the epitome
of and more suntan oil being passed around than in Jamaica, right?
Chris Versteeg, does he kind of epitomize the work ethic of Lethbridge? Would you say?
I think so. Well, it's very windy here, and so I feel like he's kind of epitomizes the place because he kind of goes with the wind and he's wind blown. He's been around a few teams, doesn't stay too long in any one place, right? As you know, Ek.
Which you've taken that trait. So yeah, I mean,
absolutely, world traveler.
So there you go. So I think that's some Lethbridge, Buffalo, and just outside of Philadelphia. As we go through this whole day, we had 12 games last night to talk about, and I watched a few. I watched a little bit of the. I thought the game of the night we talked about before was going to be the Predators and Blackhawks, and it did turn out to be a heck of a game. That was a good game for sure. And I was all ready to write my told you so blog there in the beginning because the Preds get out to a 3-0 lead and I was talking because yesterday I was really talking up the Preds, and they were the real deal, and I still think they are the real deal. But the Hawks are a great team, and there's no question about it. They battled back, they got the 3 goals, and then they end up winning in the shootout. It was fourth, actually winning 5-4. A lot of goals scored for 2 pretty good defensive teams there. But one thing I noticed again was the Predators defensively, are such a good team, and even though they gave up all these goals, and a lot of that came from the pure fact that you've got Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, you've got these skilled players on this team that can make any defense look bad. But it was a good game. And Corey Crawford again. I think this guy has really come into his own. I was not a Corey Crawford fan at one point, but at this point, Ryan, I'm a Corey Crawford fan. How about you?
Yeah, me too. Especially watching the Road to the Winter Classic stuff and being able to see and hear more of him and how he conducts himself, the preparation he goes through. It really gives you a lot of respect for a guy who you can kind of see and hear it in his voice that he kind of has that chip on his shoulder, which it's nice to see, because a lot of guys, once they cement themselves in the league and once they've won a cup, they kind of take their foot off the gas. I think we all know examples of goaltenders like that.
Yeah.
But just in his day-to-day preparation, he's always on top of it, always sounds like he's battling for that job. And maybe it's because one of his backups is like 7 feet tall, right? Kind of.
Right.
I've always liked Corey Crawford. Kind of root for those underdog guys who really shouldn't be. But through work ethic, making a name for themselves, I think he's top 10 in the league.
Yeah, he's got to be at this point. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was struck by the fact that the shots in this game were 42-40. I mean, this is 2 of the better defensive teams in the league, as you said, and it seemed to be, they seemed to like almost neutralize each other defensively, so they decided to play more of a wide open game. But I was also struck by the fact that Brad Richards has 19 points in 34 games, so I think he's still on pace to win our bet, Ak. But
it's a long season.
But no, I mean, I think these are both playoff teams. I think they both have excellent goaltending. They have 2 of the better defensive cores in the league. I think the difference between the 2 is that Chicago has probably 3 offensive lines that can score, and Nashville maybe has 2. And I think if they want to advance, they're probably going to have to acquire a player or 2 before the deadline, which I think they have the ability to do. And they Roy yesterday for Mark Arcabello, which I was essentially just an exchange of contracts for them. But if they add 1 or 2 veteran guys, and there are going to be some players available before early March, it's conceivable that Nashville could get to the Stanley Cup final. Which, based on your trips to Nashville, how exciting would that be to have that town?
Nothing better. There would be nothing better than a Stanley Cup parade down Broadway in Nashville, because that street is just phenomenal. That I can't even imagine how cool that would be. And everybody does talk about that down there too, because a little while ago, when the Tennessee Titans were getting close to winning, that was a big deal. But yeah, there would be nothing better than that for sure. And I'd love to see it. They're such an exciting team to watch, and it really. It was just a great game. It was a really well played, fast paced game. It reminded me a little bit of the LA, Chicago series from last year. It just had all that excitement to it. And and the game the other game I watched, which didn't have any of that in it at all, was the Phoenix Coyotes and Philadelphia Flyers, who Flyers are getting hard to watch right now. And it's a really tough. It's getting difficult, and the one thing I did notice last night, the goalie for the Coyotes last night, shoot, oh man, why can't I let?
Was it Dubnyk?
Yeah, right. He's been with every team imaginable over the last year. Gosh, is he terrible? I want to throw this out there right now that, he is just awful. And literally, I have not seen a goalie not able to catch the puck as much as this guy. There were just so many shots that, you're like, wait a second. Shouldn't an NHL goalie catch that puck? It would just bat off of it. He would close his glove too quickly, or wouldn't close his glove enough. And yet, the Coyotes still managed to win the game. The Flyers came out dominant in the first period, shot-wise, but couldn't get anything done. Steve Mason was back, looked shaky a little bit. You still don't know what happened there. So yeah, the whole thing is, for the Flyers, it's really a battle of what now. You know, I mean, if they're not going to make a trade soon, they're a team that has to start looking closer to the bottom than the top. I don't know, and it doesn't make any sense because offensively they have the ability to be there, and defensively they're not as bad as they're playing right now. But team wise, I think the forwards are. I think a lot of times defense gets blamed on the defenders. I don't think that. I think the defense should get blamed a little bit in Philly on the forwards. I think the forwards are very bad defensively. That's what it feels like.
I mean, from the outside looking in, I mean, last year we remember that the Flyers struggled the first month and a half of the season, and the only player that was playing really well was Mason, and then it just seemed to click. I mean, it took their coach and them to sort of mesh together. It took a little while, and then all of a sudden things just clicked into gear. And so far this year, that click has not been there. I mean. Yeah. Mason has played okay, but he hasn't played great. Their defense, they miss Timonen, and I think they're still missing the fact that Pronger isn't there, and it is a couple years now, so they should be over that. But I don't think that there's still that wide gap missing because Pronger is not there. And in spite of the fact that Voracek is close to the top of the league in scoring, or even in the lead in scoring, and Giroux, all the offense is coming from one line and maybe a little bit from the second line. They're not getting secondary offense from guys like Reed, from Couturier, from Braden Shen. And look, coming into the season, I thought that was the strength of that team, was the depth at forward and guys like Simmons and Shen and Couturier, and they're just not getting the performance out of these guys that they should be.
It is their strength, and the issue with Reed and Couturier is that they're playing with Umberger, and I hate to say it, but that's the bottom line. There are two players who are, they're not going to kill the, but you can get 20 goals out of them, in good years or whatever. Each could be a 20 goal scorer, but they're literally playing shorthanded every shift they play. They have played the entire season with R.J. Umberger, who is really so many steps behind that it's insane, and I don't understand why there isn't more of an outcry for this. Like this is it's just boggles the mind when you watch him play. Watching him play against Nashville, it's just this guy just can't do it. And he's a nice enough guy, and you hate to see this, but he is, like I said before, he reminds you of like a veteran on a tryout with a team, and he just trying to stay on for one more year, but he's not. He's a guy with a couple years more on his contract, and he's signed. But if he was on a tryout, he wouldn't be here. And so at what point the Flyers had to bite the bullet on this one and admit they screwed up. That to me is happening. Ryan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Eck. And at what point do they say, okay, we're embracing this youth movement they have with some of those young guys, Couturier and Voracek, and guys like Ronaldo and Raff, like really handing over the reins, I guess, and not moving a guy like Giroux, but definitely kind of offloading some of these veterans, LeCavalier, like you said, Umberger. If you can move him for anything at this point, right, with that contract, it's difficult. But I mean, it's kind of a team that's in between two worlds. They have to kind of find their identity a little bit, and I don't know why more teams aren't more proactive in saying, okay, you know what, we have some young, promising players, we're going to hand the keys over to them and actually see what we have with this thing and inject some energy, because you're right, there are some veteran guys, if they're not part of a contender, if they're not part of a team that's battling for home ice in the playoffs or something like that, they're kind of more of a drag on the environment or the atmosphere in the room, and just the on-play, the on-play product suffers. And for what purpose, right? A guy like that isn't going to be here a year or two down the road. When his contract expires, it's going to be his last one, unless he picks up somewhere for a year with someone else. So I don't see what the plan is, and I think that GM has to figure it out. I mean, Hextall has to figure it out and say, okay, here, be more proactive in building the team you want rather than just waiting for things to play out and hoping that they gel.
Right, and there's never been an acceptance of. Well, Philly's not a team that will ever accept a rebuild, right? So, but at the same time, there's never been an acceptance of players like Umberger on the team, like somebody like that. I've never seen this before. In all the years I've, as a fan and as a reporter, covered this team. LeCavier's been a healthy scratch a couple nights, and yeah, LeCavier has struggled, but at the same time, he brings more than R.J. Umberger brings to the table. Like he has the ability to score. Still, he might score 20 goals. And last year he scored over 20 goals. And yeah, that's not great, but it's still over 20 goals. And it's not like Cavier, but it's a good, solid third line center. And yet he's been a healthy scratch. R.J. hasn't been a healthy scratch. He's been healthy all year, and basically you're sitting back and you're watching Reed and Couturier suffer. And I'm telling you, that is why those guys' numbers are down. It's just they've put up numbers shorthanded. I mean, the two of them have scored more shorthanded than they have, right even strength, it feels like, and that's definitely the case. Mike?
Well, sorry. I mean, we said when that deal was made, Umberger and Scott Hartnell. I mean, we know of the personal animosity between him and Berube. So, and that was one of the factors in the deal. And the other factor was the fact that Umberger's contract has only 2 years left, whereas Hartnell is two more years. So, if a buyout came along, I mean, Umberger would be much easier to buy out and much less of a hit. But I don't think that Ron Hextall factored in that the disparity in the play between Hartnell, who played with Giroux, who was liked in the locker room by his teammates, how much there would be a disparity between that and Umberger, who sounds like he's an albatross around the organization's neck, and they're just waiting probably to buy him out at the end of this year.
It would hope so, but at the same time, it's at what point it does not feel like Hextall, knowing everything I know about him, would be allowing this to happen, or Berube especially. I don't know. There's something else going on here. There's something way beyond it. Obviously, I mean, maybe Umberger is the great locker room guy. I haven't really seen it, but I don't know. It's something else. But moving on from that, interesting Leaf game last night, Mike, as they another really good game, and the Leafs going up against the Lightning, two of the faster teams in the league.
Yeah, but speed wasn't central in the aspect of this game. What was central was the fact that the Maple Leafs have no concept of how to exit the defensive zone, and they showed it many times last night. Now, the thing is that Ben Bishop is one of the best goaltenders in the league. The Leafs get 2 goals on the first 2 shots, and they're up 2-0. They had no business being up 2-0. But they were, they in a sense lucked out. I mean, 2 really good plays by Mike Santorelli and Joffrey Lupul. They have the lead. They were outshot 15-4 at the end of the first period, and then gave up the first 11 shots in the second period. They were outshot 26-4. They did not have a shot for as long as a period, and that was not that was the example of what was going on. Every time they tried to get the puck out of their own zone at the blue line, if it was a battle between the Lightning defenseman and the Leaf forward, the Lightning defenseman won it. The Leaf forwards would come back in the zone trying to help out the defense, and they would give away the puck. Tampa scores 2 goals in the middle of the second period, ties the game up, and then Toronto starts getting shots on goal, and the game-winning goal in the third period, Dion Phaneuf shoots it up the boards, past the forward who was there to help the puck out of the zone. He gives it right to the point guy who shoots it, and Steven Stamkos, who is his man in front of the net, is standing there all alone in front of Reimer to deflect the puck. Not just Phaneuf, but this team has absolutely no concept of how to play defensive hockey, and it's not the coaching, because the coaching has been drilling it into their skull. They just don't want to play defensive hockey, and now they've lost 5 of the last 6 games, and losing streak, here you come.
Well, this is the issue, and Ryan, I want your opinion on this quote, okay? Because this is from Darren Dreger on TSN Radio regarding the Maple Leafs yesterday, and this is what I was sent this by a reader who emailed me this, and I thought it was really fascinating. He says, the only point that management in Toronto embraces, this is Dreger talking about the Maple Leafs, and remember, Dreger, is very tied in with Maple Leafs. So when he talks about Toronto, we really, especially management, you have to think, okay, there's something to this. He says the only point that management in Toronto embraces the thinking that it's not working and they have to fix it is when the market dictates that it's worth stepping in and doing something significant. All right, so let's dissect that sentence for a second.
What?
I know. All right, so here we go. We'll dissect when the Maple Leafs feel like something on their side is not working. The only time they think that and that they have to fix it is when the market dictates that it's worth stepping in and doing something significant. Brian?
Okay, how could the market? Okay, you play in the center of the hockey universe. All due respect to Montreal, Toronto is the epicenter. Okay,
right.
How would the market possibly dictate that you need to make a change? Would people stop coming to the games?
No, I don't think that's what he means. I'm going to stop you for a second. That would be ridiculous. But I think what he means here is the market of the trade market in general in the NHL. So he's saying that, which that's what I think he's saying at least.
Which makes even less sense, I think.
Which makes even less sense, exactly.
No, I mean, does he mean that all of a sudden, if they're selling out of pitchforks at the local hardware store, that means that Dave Nonis should get off his ass and make a deal? I mean, yeah, no.
Right. This is saying that if the trade market, this is saying that you are too afraid to get taken in a deal than you are to make a change. I'm going to summarize that. That's what you're too afraid that you're going to make a bad deal because the marketplace, in your opinion, is not good. Then you are, so you're not going to go out. You're going to go out there and you're going to say, okay, the market is this, but other teams manage to make trades
which is a terrible way to approach things because
right.
Look, I play a little poker now and then, and there's a rule in poker. Okay, you have to look at the table, and if the table is super tight, if there's nothing happening, that's when you loosen up, right? That's when you play more aggressively to take advantage. When the table's super loose, when everyone's throwing money around and playing any two cards, that's when you tighten up, right? And strengthen and just batten down the hatches. And I think the same way goes for the trade market. When there's nothing happening, when everyone's frozen and you say, we can't make a deal, that's when you have to be proactive. That's when you have to be the one making the calls and actually, getting out there and making things happen, stirring the pot. Because it's not going to happen on its own. A guy like Dave Nonis isn't going to just be handed the sun, moon, and the stars, right? And I think
but the thing is
find himself in some urgency because don't you think Brendan Shanahan? He is the one who has to answer to the board. He is the one that has to answer to the fans. And if they miss the playoffs this season, Nonis has got to go. Like he's the one who I'm very surprised. That you're not seeing him making some proactive moves. And everyone talks about moving Jake Gardiner, and I heard this the other day that someone had said, well, it's not Jake Gardner's fault because that's just the style that the Leafs play. They play this chaotic style where they're not a commitment to defense. So, where does it come from, right?
That's a complete low. See that's from the anti-Carlisle faction. Is that don't blame Jake Gardiner for his irresponsible defensive play. Don't blame Dion Phaneuf for having 7 giveaways in a shift. I'm using hyperbole here. No, don't blame the players for their actions on the ice. Blame the coaches because they're not telling this team the right thing to do, that is a joke.
Well, it goes on, Mike. It goes on. The quote continues, and this gets even better in some ways. I mean, I will agree with what Ryan says real fast in saying that, if you're going to make a really good trade in this league, you usually have to make it when there apparently is no market at all. Because if you're going to go out there, really good GMs find other players out there that they feel like that GM or that coach is down on and that they think they could do something with, and they go and approach them about it. And they say, okay, I want to take that guy from your team because I think I can do something with him on my team. But you obviously don't like him. So those kind of players aren't being shopped. They just sort of there's plenty of those guys that exist in the league. I mean, there's plenty of those players out there all the time. So finding those guys is the key. And this is, Brian Burke told me this a long time ago. Those are the guys he looks for. Those are the guys you look for out there that are being underused, are misunderstood, and are in bad straits with their coach and they're kind of beyond repair in that organization. And yet, bring them somewhere else, and they might be okay.
And that's at the heart of the deal that he made with Philadelphia. I mean, Van Riemsdyk's situation in Philadelphia, he needed to change his scenery. Schen's situation in Toronto, top 5 picks.
Precisely. The Flyers weren't shopping Van Riemsdyk to anyone else. I mean, it's just that he just came to JV. He said, I like JVR, and he knew from working with Holmgren at the U.S. For the U.S. team that Holmgren wasn't a big JVR fan. So that's how this played out. So, okay, so this goes on. So remember, the only point that management in Toronto embraces the thinking that it's not working and they have to fix it is when the market dictates that it's worth stepping in and doing something significant. That's why Nonis, for the most part, since he's been GM, has virtually left all players as marketable. There are no untouchables. Then you get into the semantics. Are they listening on Lupul and Gardner or shopping? The gap between that semantics game will narrow if things go poorly for the Leafs in the second half of the season. The players that would fetch a decent return are players that this team still feels they need to build around. All right.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting quote, because I think Toronto's problem is the same problem that several teams in the league have, and one of them is St. Louis, which they don't have that big center to build around, and they haven't had that for years and years since Sundin left, right? And so if you don't have a center to build your team around, you lack an identity, you lack focus, you lack all these things. I mean, I kind of look at people talk about the St. Louis Blues being this great team, but Stastny hasn't been the guy they thought he was going to be when he came in, and he was kind of supposed to be the centerpiece of that team, coming down the pivot. So it's in my estimation, when you look at the Leafs, it really just comes down to a lack of leadership, a lack of really using the assets that they do have, which is some of their young defensemen, which is some of their scoring wingers, and using those assets to really cement some roles that they have been unable to fill for years and years now.
And reading between the lines, Zach, what it smacks to me of is that they're not getting what they expect to get for a Lupul or a Gardner or the players that they are willing to deal. So they're talking this market stuff. They're talking this, okay, well, if the market is right, then we'll make the deal. Well, no, I mean, honestly, the market is never going to be right for a guy who gives away the puck as often as Gardner does, who's noticeably defensively in a liability, and scores 8 points in 30 some odd games. I mean, you're never going to prop up the value of that guy in Toronto. And I also think it's a reflection of the market in the sense that this organization still feels the heat and the burning of the Kessel deal, of just the criticism that they took over 3 years for. And the thing is, the deal has turned out to be okay. Seguin and Dougie Hamilton. Hamilton's going to be a good NHL defenseman. Seguin gets moved from Boston, so it's not like they have to face the guy that they traded in the deal 5 times a year. But the stigma of giving up a guy who is one of the best young centers in the NHL for a guy in Phil Kessel who plays when he feels like it sometimes, that is something that they still feel day by day as the Leafs organization.
Yeah, I don't buy that Seguin would have been Seguin in Toronto. I'm going to throw that out there right now too. Like, I think that we went to a situation in Boston that was perfect, where he could come in slowly, and he was pretty bad early on. And that would have been in Toronto. There would have been issues there that would have come up, but in Boston you could bury it, right? So it wasn't so. And I don't buy that. I mean,
it was more what he represented, Ek. I mean, that city, in terms of, if there is a city, if you think Buffalo is obsessed about getting the number 1 pick in the draft, Toronto, that is the end all or be all. How many times did we talk about Tavares? How many times did we talk about Stamkos?
And that's also why this trade happened, because, and I've said it many times, Brian Burke was sick of that. He was sick of that world of sitting back and saying we're going to get the top pick. You can go out and get Kessel, who actually is, when you look at Kessel's numbers, has been very good. Now, we don't, that's numbers, okay, and that's not seeing. I know that you see him on a day-to-day basis, but the same could be said about Seguin. Seguin's numbers are really good too, but I know people who follow Seguin the same way and say that there's issues there too. So you can go, but at the time, Kessel was going to help sooner than any of these other things were going to help in Toronto. He was going to help quicker than Seguin was going to help. And you couldn't wait another 2 years. You couldn't wait another 3 years for all this stuff to develop. And that's where Toronto was. And they didn't want to sit there and root for, Tank Nation and all that stuff. That wasn't going to happen. So,
yeah. Well, but
it's easy in hindsight because no one thought the Leafs were going to be that bad that year, right?
Right.
So,
don't say that.
No.
Come on, top 2 pick bad, Mike? You never expected that.
Well, I said prior to that year, because their their pickups prior to that year, and not to go down memory lane here, but they picked up Boschman and Komisarek and spent big money on them, and Brian Burke came out and said that that team was a playoff team.
Right.
With the addition of those two guys, they're other than Phil Kessel, their number one forward was Matt Stajan, and their number two forward was Jason Blake. So yes, I thought that team was going to be a bottom 10 team. Did I think they were going to finish 29th? No, but I knew they weren't going to make the playoffs, and I knew it was more PR that they were pulling, to encourage this, like similar to what Burke has done in Calgary. But the thing is, in Calgary, he had a lot more talent to work with from the very beginning. With Brody and with Giordano and a couple young players, and they've turned it around quickly. In Toronto, he still had to gut that team and rebuild them. And that didn't happen until 2 years after the deal when they brought in Van Riemsdyk and they brought in a few other players. So yeah, it was a pipe dream that team was going to make the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, this goes on. It goes on a little bit further too, and it says this gets even. Well, I'm going to throw this out, then we'll get off the leaves. But this was a really interesting quote from Drager because we know how connected he is with that team.
Yeah.
It says, okay, so he says, what can I tell you? What I can tell you is talking to other teams around the league, they look at the Leafs and they say they're doing great. Those other teams look at the standings. They don't analyze things like we do. Closer to home, it seems more desperate than it does really around the rest of the league. And you'd agree with that, Mike, I'm sure.
That's stupid. Does he really think people are stupid?
Yes.
He must think the other GMs they don't see any further than this. Oh, how do the Leafs look in the standings? Oh, they're good? Oh, wow, okay, I guess they're for real. Come on.
When you go 10-1-1 and win 6 in a row and then lose 5 of 6, oh, yeah, everything's great.
Right.
No one in Toronto says that, though. I mean, if you're listening to anyone, any talk radio, anything, even when they were winning, people were crapping on the team, and rightly so, right? Because they were being outshot every night, outchanced every night. The defense was a mess.
Listen to the post-game radio, Ryan. I swear to God, the Leafs Nation has turned into ISIS, and they want to look for a machete to start decapitating people. So no, it's not. That's not the case.
He says that people in Toronto know it's more desperate, and he says I do think there is a degree of we're not stupid, but there is a degree of the Leafs aren't as bad. I've said this, aren't as bad as as whatever. Yeah. I agree. And then he's okay. So he says maybe they do have. Okay, so he says, where is this organization? Are they a playoff team? Maybe, but they're not a contending team. Maybe they do have some not glaring but weaknesses that management is going to have to address. Can Kadri develop into that number one center? If Kadri doesn't develop into that number one center, is Bozak good enough to be a number one center to lead you deep into the playoffs? We don't know. I like him, but I'm not convinced on a deep team that he's a number one center. Are any of the Leafs' so-called top four defense screaming to be a number one on a real good contending team? No, they're not. So there are some holes that, if they're not filled internally by development, that maybe sooner rather than later in the next year, plus Toronto as management group is going to have to address. Big question always is the same. How? Top players aren't available often by trade, and Leafs are a cap team unable to spend in the summer. Gauthier and Nylander are top prospects, but part of the issue, again, is that there are no blue-chip guys coming up. Well, aren't they blue-chip guys? Anyway, that part of the problem...
Nylander is. Nylander is a blue-chip guy, but the thing, and like we said yesterday, Yak, Nylander is the same type of player of the players that they already have. They have guys who are strong in the offensive zone and weak in the defensive zone, and that's Nylander. He's slight, he's speedy, he's not particularly strong along the boards. That's not his game. So he's going to fit in right away with Kessel and Van Riemsdyk and Lupul and Kadri. But the problem is they need somebody like a Jonathan Taves or a Ryan Getzlaf, a two-way behemoth who can play in his own zone, who can neutralize an offensive attack of another team, and can turn it around the other way and help on the offense. They don't have that player, and you can't trade for that player because nobody's going to trade those players. The only way you get those players is like Anaheim and like Chicago, which is drafting them, and that's why trading 2 first-round picks for Phil Kessel was a stupid move in a lot of the estimation of Leaf fans.
Yeah, but then we can debate this all day long, and we've had debated for years. But I don't know. At the time, I thought it was a good trade. I still would do it. I still would do that trade. looking back at the time. It's 2020 hindsight, sure, but when you're looking back then, where they were, I don't think they were. I agree with Ryan that they're a top. If you say they're one of the, if they're not a playoff team, but they're not also a top, 5 pick team, then you're in a spot where, if you're not in the top 5, yeah, get Kessel. Kessel for it turns into the top Sagan is a different thing, but Kessel you have to think that Kessel's going to make your team good enough to not be a bottom. So you have to, the way he's thinking in that trade, I totally agreed with at the time. I still agree with now. I think it would do it again. But
because what does the 10th pick in the draft give you? Guys like Brian Lee, who cares? Those guys are
right. It's not going to be what Kessel gives you, which is a guy who's still really young and has scored how many goals already? He's already way up there on the goal scoring. If you look at young players scoring goals, he's up there.
The disease in Toronto is mediocrity. That is the problem. They're and like you just said, they're not good enough to make the playoffs, but they're not bad enough to finish 29th overall and draft linchpin franchise level players who can dig them out of this problem. That's the thing, and that's the failing. I understand why Brian Burke did what he did, but if his main job, and one of the considerations before he was hired in Toronto was the fact that he would have the strength to go to the MLS&E board and say, we're going to rebuild this team because the only way we can rebuild it and then be a success 5 or 6 years down the road is to draft young kids who can be building blocks. They don't have building blocks, and they still don't have building blocks after 5 or 6 years.
Burke, in retrospect, overplayed his hand on that he could get some players to take discounts to come and play in Toronto. I think that's where they overplayed his hand. I think he really felt that there would be some free agents because there's 2 ways to build this. If you're going to be in the middle ground, you can either field an AHL team like the Penguins did for 5 years, or you can, and like the Oilers are doing now, or you can go and you can either sign free agents, and get them to come to your team, or you can draft really well in other rounds. You can come up with like the Red Wings have done, where you come up with 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round guys who are stars. Nylander's a good point on that. They picked a good player there. He's a good player, and that shows that you don't have to be the top pick in the draft.
Yeah, that's what the Blackhawks did. You look at Taves. Okay, yeah, Taves superstar, Kane superstar. But guys like Keith and Seabrook, and they filled out their roster with Saad, the Bufflins, all these guys, they were not top picks. They were not top 5 picks. So you have to draft well and develop well. That is the bottom line. Because teams like Los Angeles, you could look and say, okay, yeah, Anze Kopitar, that was a pretty good draft pick for them. But he wasn't a top pick.
Right, he wasn't.
Guys like Jonathan Quick, he wasn't a top pick. Drew Doughty.
Badgeroux was a mid-first
Drew
round.
was the 2nd pick overall, and Kopitar was a first rounder, I think 11th overall. Yeah. So yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility that you can get a superstar player drafting in the top 15 of the draft. I'm just saying that your odds of drafting somebody who's an impact player goes up as you get higher in the draft. You get a Barkov, you get a Huberdeau. If you look at Florida, their building blocks: Ekblad #1, Huberdeau in the top 5, Goodbranson in the top 5. All these guys who are building blocks for that team are all top 5 picks. And if they turn it around in the next year after adding some veterans like Mitchell and Boland and Luongo, it's going to be on the strength of those top 5 picks.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it's going to be developing their own talent. And
that too.
Yeah, which is in
exactly. Which makes you look and say, okay, if you're drafting in the top 5, the people say, okay, take the best player available, blah blah blah. Don't draft for need. But why would you draft anything other than stud defenseman or center?
Right, exactly. I'm with you. No, I'm completely with you. And that's true with some of these teams. Like Edmonton is going to be in. We talked about this yesterday. I want to get into it today, Ryan, because Edmonton's starting to separate themselves from the pack here for the McDavid sweepstakes. They're starting to do their thing. They're starting to. And now we're in this bind. What the hell to do? Because okay, if they're going to get Connor McDavid, all right. And honestly, we talked about this yesterday in the debate. I said there's no way in hell you can trade Connor McDavid. You've got to bring him in. He's a generational player, better than any of your other top picks you've gotten. Yep. But what Connor McDavid does is it gives you the opportunity to now start thinking about trading Nugent Hopkins or Taylor Hall. Now I wouldn't. I would honestly go with Connor McDavid and Taylor Hall, and that would be my 1-2 punch, and I would keep that going forever. But I think Nugent Hopkins, Eberle, these other players, if you know you have McDavid coming, or at least if you don't have McDavid, you have Eichel. I mean, if you're not going to finish worse than second. So you've got a superstar here coming. What to do, Ryan? I mean, this is the issue, right?
That is the issue, because you have to move some of these guys eventually, right? You can't have Eberle at $6 million for the next 6 years, sitting there, producing at the capability of a second-line winger. Like, that's just not going to cut it. You can't. I mean, you kind of insulated yourself, giving all these guys the same contract, hoping they'd all grow up together. Boys on the bus, part 2, right? And it hasn't worked out that way at all. So what you have to do is deal one of those guys, one of those 3, Hall, Nugent Hopkins, or Eberle, whoever you want. At this point, Oiler fans honestly do not care. They're not emotionally attached to any of these guys. They don't have a single good moment in their hockey and NHL careers that people can look back on and say, hey, remember when that guy did that for us? No, nothing. Right. So cut ties and build your defense.
Yes.
Don't even worry about center. If you're getting McDavid, that's your center. Piece of cake.
Or Eichel. Either's fine.
Well, yeah, that's right. So what you do, you don't even need to go out and go, okay, we need Shea Weber in town. Just go out and get NHL caliber first or second pairing defensemen who you can use to round out, at least to limit the damage, right? At least start building from the back, from the goal out, because if you don't do that, we've seen this league, the NHL is not a league where you can win a horse race. It is not a league where you can rely on getting 4 or 5 goals every night and think that will sustain you, because it might work for a little while, but eventually it stops working. And if you want to build a team that's going to have sustained playoff success, I mean, look at the best teams in the league. Look at the Kings, the Penguins, the Blackhawks, even the Canadiens, and the Rangers. They are building defenses that are mobile, that are tough, that limit the second chances, limit rebound opportunities, limit puck possession in their own end. That's the bottom line, because you're not going to win. Seriously, you're not going to win a track meet in today's NHL.
Well, we know, one of the things that Edmonton has to do is sort of break the cycle of madness that they've been following the last couple of years, where these guys get drafted second, third overall, and they're immediately in the league. They made the mistake this year with Draisaitl. I think from what is being reported the last day or so with the acquisition of Roy, they may send Draisaitl back to Prince Albert in the Western Hockey League and let him finish out the rest of the year. They've already used 1 year of his entry-level deal, but it wouldn't burn a year of free agency down the line. But it's more the fact to let the kid mature, let him play in a league that he's more apt to, that it's more for him at this point.
Let him play on a winning team in a winning situation for a little bit.
Exactly. Let him do that. But the thing is that next year, say that everything falls into place and they draft McDavid number 1 overall, you have now an 18-year-old McDavid as your number 1 center. How old is Nugent Hopkins? 22, 23 years old? Yeah. He's your number 2 center, and a 20-year-old Leon Draisaitl is your number 3 center. That's the problem there. You've got too much youth now in the middle of the lineup. Maybe you can move Draisaitl to the wing until he's ready to play center, but again, you have no veteran support structure there, unless you consider guys like Matt Hendricks and Boyd Gordon a good support structure, and I don't see that. So, yeah, they've got to make decisions on some of the forwards that they have, move some of them out, get some veteran players who they can build around, like Calgary did. I mean, use Calgary as the model, because that team is way far ahead than Edmonton is in terms of the evolutionary scale of a team that can eventually win.
But it's from getting guys like, Johnny Gaudreau, not with the first overall picks, but like in really good. Like Gaudreau was a good draft pick. They made good picks in Calgary. They have some good young players. They made good signings. They've been smart. I mean, if I'm sitting there in Edmonton, who I'm targeting right now? Seth Jones. I'm going after Seth Jones because Seth Jones is the kind of guy that they need. Seth Jones is expendable in Nashville, as crazy as it sounds. He's going to demand a big contract that Nashville's not going to want to put more money into their defense. And, Nashville could use, an Eberle or a Nugent Hopkins up front. And to me, that's the move that they should make. That's where they should go, because there's just, that gets them. I mean, Seth Jones is a star. He's going to be a star player. He's already really good. He's a huge, big defenseman. Gives you that puck moving guy. Responsible both ways. And I think gettable. I think, but only for top flight talent.
I think the only problem with that, Eck, is that Seth Jones is 19 years old right now. Not to say that he's not mature and he's not a guy who can be a future building block, but of course I'm going to sound self-serving here. The deal that makes the most sense for me in terms of Edmonton is going after a Phaneuf, is going after a guy who's locked up on a deal, who's there, who could be there for 5 or 6 years. He's an Edmonton native. He's a leader, and have him as your number 2 defenseman. I mean, not to say don't go out and get yourself other guys in other ways, but I think you need a number 1 defenseman who can log 20 to 25 minutes and be an anchor back there, and that's a Phaneuf. That's like a Seabrook if Chicago decides that they have to move him for cap reasons, something of that nature.
I think you're right, Mike, and I think the approach needs to be, let's not build a team for 3 years from now. Let's build a team for today. Let's build a team for right now. Why not try to win today, right? Not today, because this year's done, right? Yeah, but let's start making moves with an eye to actually compete for something in September, October, right, when the season starts up again, so that you have pieces in place where, they got into this mindset, this horrible mindset, where when they brought in Nikita Nikitin in the offseason, actually ended up trading a 5th-round pick for the rights to negotiate with the guy, and then somehow ended up giving him $4.5 million for 2 years. People called it a bridge contract. In a non-traditional sense. This isn't a bridge to his next deal. This is a bridge to these guys like Oscar Klefbom and Darnell Nurse, who are going to have come in on the blue line 2 years from now. Yeah. And I looked around and I thought, is this it? And the Oiler fans just accepted it. And I looked around and thought, this is insane. This is insane that we're now bringing people in on bridge deals, not because we want them around 2 years from now, but because we want them on short-term deals so that we can get rid of them when we're ready for.
Well, it's because they couldn't get anybody else,
unproven players.
They couldn't get anybody else, They couldn't get anybody else to go to Edmonton.
No, because they weren't willing to pay the price to get anybody else.
No, I think more than that. I honestly think they couldn't get any defenseman who was a big free agent and really.
But I think that's an excuse too, Eck. I think it's an excuse that people buy into, and they just say, okay, you know what, we're the armpit of the league. No one wants to play here. And it's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. You know what the Oilers should have done a couple of years ago? They should have gone out and got a Brian Campbell, a guy who was just kind of out there, looking for a place to play. No one wanted to absorb that contract. The Oilers could have done it. They had tons of money to spend. So at least you get a cornerstone on your blue line, a guy who can move the puck, a guy with some veteran experience, right? Because the more you say no one wants to play here, we have to bring in these guys and overpay them just because guys refuse to come here. I think you approach it that way. Look, Brian Burke does not, I know I've said this before, but Brian Burke does not say, oh, we're Calgary, we suck, no one wants to play here. It's 2 hours from Edmonton, right? It's not
a big. I know. I agree with you. And I agree with you. You're right. I am overstating that.
The mindset is completely different in the two markets.
But also, there was no free agent last year. Niskanen. I mean, Niskanen's not going to help him. I mean, the free agents last summer were not the kind of the free agents that they needed to look at, like Willie Mitchell, somebody like that. That's where what Willie Mitchell's done in Florida has been outstanding. Yeah. But he brings solid defensive and leadership and a winning cup and a great locker room. That's the kind of guy.
And an Orpik has his flaws, but that's another guy. Like, look, if you're bringing in, they brought in, they thought, Marchand was going to be, or what's his face? Ferentz was going to be that guy. Jeez, I'm losing my mind.
Right.
They thought Ferentz was going to be that guy, but he was 2 years overdue, right?
He was.
And if you look at the free agent class this year, if you're Edmonton, you don't go after Cody Franzen, you don't go after Mike Green, you go after Mark Stahl. But the problem is Mark Stahl's not going to come to Edmonton. So the only way that you can really solve the circle of madness is if you're going to go out and get yourself a defenseman, you get somebody who is locked up on a deal right now that they can't have a choice one way or the other whether they're going to go to Edmonton or not. They're in Edmonton because they got a deal. So that's what I'm saying. Phaneuf is under contract for 6 more years. If he accepts the trade to Edmonton, he's the king of Edmonton.
But he doesn't, I don't think. And Phaneuf, just speaking of Phaneuf personally, I don't think that Phaneuf accepts that trade to Edmonton. I don't think that. I mean, I don't know. I really think that yes, you need to do it now, but also in terms of now, meaning next year, they have to get better. There are defensemen that are going to be out there that are role-playing defensemen that you can sign as free agents that will help you. But if you're going to move one of those big guys, you're going to do it for Seth Jones. You're not going to do it for Dion Phaneuf or anything like that. You're going to do it for Seth Jones.
Or you're going to do it for Olli Maatta in Pittsburgh. You're going to do it for someone who is on the upswing, right? Who's going to be better, whose best years aren't behind him. Because I don't think it helps unless you bring in 4 or 5 of those guys who are going to provide this totally new identity. But then you still get into the problem the Oilers had when these young guys were coming up, which was the kids versus the vets. And there was kind of a divided locker room between the guys who made that 06 Cup run, your Hemskys and Horkoffs and Pisani, versus, okay, we're the future, we're the new kids in town. You have to...
Well, that has to be bridge. You need the right kind of guys in the locker room to make that bridge, because I've seen it happen. I've seen it, I saw it in Philly when the Flyers went to the Cup final against Chicago. There was definitely an older group and a younger group. And and Pronger bridged that gap, and you just need a guy in there who's going to be able to do that. I think that Edmonton didn't have that guy before.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the issue, right? Because that can be overcome, though. You can get past that young versus old thing, but it has to be done with it. It needs to come internally. It's not a coach. It has to be internally in the room. There have to be players, like mature young players, and not so mature older players who are able to completely keep that keep that.
Exactly. And look, the Oilers could be the first team this year, or the first team in recent memory, to fire 2 coaches in the same year, because they are currently on a 9-game losing streak. We followed up their 11-game losing streak a couple weeks ago, and they got the Kings tonight, and then the Flames tomorrow. So it looks like it's going to reach. We could reach 11 here.
And this brings up my other point, which I brought up yesterday, which we can end on today, which is that the NHL needs a law. We need a new rule. We need to change things that a team that gets the first overall pick can't get the first overall pick again for 3 years. This is my new rule, that it has to happen, that you can't just, because what is happening right now, in Edmonton is in a way terrible for the NHL. Throwing all these superstars into the same pot. I mean, you're going to get Connor McDavid goes there now, and maybe they come through and they break through, and that's fine. But Connor McDavid in Arizona, Connor McDavid in Carolina would make a whole lot of bigger difference.
Yeah.
Well, there's a way to prevent that from happening. They're just going to fix the lottery.
Yeah, fix it meaning like fix it like.
Yeah. Meaning like I was saying yesterday is somebody who has the 11th pick, wins the lottery and with a 1.5% chance of getting the first pick, and they're going to be the one that get Connor McDavid instead of the Oilers. I mean, the Oilers will still get themselves a good young player, but
right.
If we're
going to fix it, it'll be this year, because. I honestly think that if there's no marketing person in their right mind that would say Connor McDavid Edmonton makes sense for the NHL. I mean, there's just no at this point. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it really, they need to. I mean, there's one side of me that wants, okay, I really want a Connor McDavid to an Edmonton or a Calgary or some. It's been forever, and Eric Toshik talked about this in the other show that I do about, like, it's been forever since a generational player has been drafted into a Canadian franchise. That's Crosby, McKinnon, these guys are, have gotten, but at the same time, it's just like there is a point at which, how many first overall picks can you have before you're taking these guys? And Yakupov first, for example, I mean, as much as it turned out really wonderfully for Columbus not to get Yakupov, at the time, they wanted Yakupov, and it would have been better if Edmonton hadn't gotten Yakupov and gotten Ryan Murray. So the whole thing.
Well, and you're in a weird situation in Edmonton, because it's like yeah, you want McDavid, but then you're embarrassed, right? You're
Yeah, right.
embarrassed just the fact that because there's really two conversations surrounding the pick, even now, like
Yeah.
before the new year. The first one is the Oilers don't deserve Connor McDavid, which is
Right.
absolutely true because they're in this boat because of horrible management of their assets, bar none. So do they deserve a bailout in the form of Connor McDavid? Absolutely not. And the second thing is people are already worried that Connor McDavid is going to pull an Eric Lindros and refuse to play in Edmonton. So that's a fun conversation to have surrounding your franchise as well, where half your fan base is worried that there's a legitimate chance this guy could flat out refuse to come to your city. So it's embarrassing all the way around.
Yeah, that's the tough part of this whole thing. And, I mean, and at the same time, I don't know why I'm still an optimist about the Edmonton Oilers going forward. And I sit there and I look at, and I look at Nurse and I look at these other. I do really see they have,
Will you never learn, Ak? Will you never learn?
Well, they are two centers, first line left wing, first line right wing, 3 defensemen, and a starting goaltender away from playoffs.
So there's reason for optimism.
There's reason for optimism. That's only 7 players.
7 pieces away.
7 pieces away. There's the title for the show. Okay, so anyway, that's all for today. Great show, fun as always, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
And we'll be back again tomorrow with one last show for the rest of the rest of the year on New Year's Eve. But we'll have to do NHL New Year's resolutions or something, looking back on the past or something fun, and we can actually look back at some of our predictions. And I'd like to throw out some predictions for next year too. So we'll do some of those things tomorrow.
Mine are already crashing and burning. I predicted that there would not be an NHL coach fired this year, and they're going like hotcakes. It's ridiculous.
That's right. I know. The one I will say is I predicted Voracek would be an All-Star in Columbus. I got that one right. He'll be for the All-Star game. But there's not many that I've gotten right. So we'll have to look at them. We'll take a good long look at them tomorrow. All right, cool guys. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We'll talk to you soon.